Hello and welcome. You're with IndiaPostLive.com, India's first live conversation web television. This is one platform where all of you can participate through your posts, your audio comments, your video comments, and of course your tweets at hashtag IndiaPostLive and at the rate IndiaPostLive. Well, the conversation we are having today is on the Planning Commission, which in fact does not even exist in the present government. So, Narendra Modi, the plan of the Narendra Modi government is to review, revamp, downsize and restructure the panel of the Planning Commission. This decision, this plan has in fact found many takers across party lines. The Planning Commission, you will remember, is an extra constitutional body that was formed through a cabinet decision in 1950. But does that mean that the Planning Commission, which has in fact been economically dominating the country for more than 64 years, will it become totally irrelevant? Let's take a quick look. It was the country's top advisory body. No successful trip of a chief minister visiting Delhi would be complete without a visit to the Planning Commission. But the all-powerful body is now going to have its wings clipped under the new regime. Experts say that a growth-oriented Modi government wants states to have more say in utilization of funds, and the Commission has often been blamed for policy paralysis. The government's intention to restructure the plan panel has surprisingly received thumbs up from both the BJP and the Congress. So, in a new free market system, is the Planning Commission set to lose its relevance entirely? All right, so to talk about the Planning Commission and its relevance, I have with me in the studio Dr. Pipul Rao, economist and journalist. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. And I also have Girija Shivkumar. She has been a journalist who writes on economic affairs, and now she's also an entrepreneur. Right, thanks. Girija, thank you so much for joining the conversation. All of you, if you have any tweets, any comments while the conversation is on, please feel free to post them at IndiaPostLive.com. So let me first ask you the question that we're asking, the Planning Commission, which has been in existence since 1950 through a cabinet decision, is it completely irrelevant now? Is that where we are going with this new government?
I mean, whatever the new government decides need not necessarily be fully right also. See, there was a time when the Planning Commission did a great amount of work, when there was no knowledge of what the country was about, what was needed during that era of planning, say maybe the first 3-4 plans. After that, we still need, even today, with a vast governmental machinery, to have some coordinating body.
Yes.
Otherwise, we don't know what the Ministry of Rural Development is doing, or the Tribal Affairs Ministry, or the other bodies, who is giving money for what. There will be duplicity of schemes. Now, I am not defending the way the Planning Commission has been functioning in the last 10 years or 15 years, where I am very skeptical of the kind of members they have taken on also. They have not contributed much, I am sorry to say this. There was a crisis in agriculture. What was the member agriculture doing? There's a crisis in, say, infrastructure. What was the member doing? He was clashing with the other, all kinds of things. The membership was very, I would say, deficient in what it should have done. But there is a need for a body. I'll give you a simple instance. Let us say they sanction some funds for Department of Women Welfare to various states. And now that ministry will give various state governments the money, monitor the performance, and comes back to the Planning Commission. Okay, you remove the Planning Commission, but there must be some body to know what all the ministries are doing. Otherwise, one ministry will make a particular, who will sanction the money? The Finance Ministry will sanction the money.
But that is where we are going now, isn't it? The government plans to give more powers to the Finance Ministry as far as budgetary allocations for various states are concerned.
No, various states, yes. What is due to the states will be given to the states, even now. The central government never used to run the schemes directly.
Right.
Till recently, because they wanted their stamp, like Manrega and other things. They said, we are doing it, so we'll finance it. Otherwise, earlier, to the best of my knowledge, all schemes should be state implemented, because they have to be implemented locally. What is happening in a village, say in my district of West Godavari, how will somebody sitting here know? Only the district administration will know, and he will inform the state government. The state government will then be asked how you spent the money.
Right.
And that's the way the CAG works, that's the way the Planning Commission works. So, by all means, reform and change the Planning Commission, but have somebody which will be responsible for seeing that the money is not squandered again or duplicated or done all kinds of things. Just to say Finance Ministry will coordinate. Finance Ministry is not that big a body to take care of everything. Or it will create its own Planning Commission.
Some burden needs to be taken off. Let me just bring Girija in here. Girija, sir talked of the relevance of the Planning Commission over the past decade. But do you think the Planning Commission has been losing its relevance in the post-liberalization era?
I mean, certainly I have to agree with sir, but I would also like to add that a reorganization or a remake or a reassessment is only a welcome move. I would like to begin at the outset by saying that, because there are various aspects, even centrally sponsored schemes, the sort of outcomes that states were pushed to perform were often not considered critical by the states themselves. And also with, sir mentioned the Finance Commission, a lot of the sort of payments are automatic payments based on preset formulas, which may not take into consideration sort of specific understanding or intelligence of specific sectors as well. So there are technical aspects to it, but of course in terms of a relook, a reapproach, it seems completely in sync with the attitude and the approach that this government has had in the last 1 month that we've seen. So I genuinely think of it as a welcome move, and I do think that, a 2.0 version or an update or an upgrade is welcome in this time.
So do you think from a planning commission, it now needs to become a reforms commission to continue the reforms that the government...
I mean, certainly. You have the CBO in America, you have this, you have a changed model even in Australia and China. So, even the IEO has suggested to look at reforms and solutions, and that's only a healthy approach and change in keeping with the requirements and the necessity of this country today. So I think it's a welcome move, and I don't see it as an alarmist or need to get worried. It's a welcome change.
You were just saying, Dr. Rao, that you're not very happy with the way things have happened in the past decade or decade and a half. Give us a little more detail on that.
See,
what has gone wrong in the Planning Commission?
First of all, the members, it was a very powerful Planning Commission. Let us not forget that. It was a person-centric body now. And Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia was a very powerful individual with close access to the Prime Minister. He served with him as Finance Secretary, he served with him in various ministries, and therefore the access to the Prime Minister and being the Prime Minister's man gave him a lot of aura and importance. And that passed on to the members who kind of interfered, who didn't come up with new ideas, they were obstructionist, etc. Aside from all of this, Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, in his own wisdom, took on the formation of the unique ID and spent 15,000 crores, they say, and brought Mr. Nandan Nilekani in it. That is not the job of the Planning Commission, to allot funds to itself and put up a scheme which has been thrashed for the last 3 years. That it was a card of no value, there was no security backup, there was no ID check, that they just gave you a number. They gave you, every individual, a number. They spent 15,000 crores. This is the kind of, may I say, expansionist policies which Mr. Ahluwalia followed. And we have to now say, since he was in absolute control, and in my memory, I don't think there was anybody who has enjoyed 10 years of vice chairmanship of the Planning Commission in India. Maximum they had 3-4 years, some of them had even 2 years. Our present Rashtrapati had only 2 years, and so on. Therefore, he has to take a part of the blame that his presiding over the Planning Commission has made a change necessary. And as our friend has said, change is always a constant and we should welcome it. Change need not be bad. But the person who should be blamed definitely is this last vice chairman, who has obviously presided or presiding potentially over its demise.
But ironically, the last finance minister in the UPA, Mr. P. Chidambaram himself has said that the Planning Commission is flabby.
We've seen this in the news recently. That's also a welcome acknowledgement from a former finance
so it's
minister.
like the new plan has found takers across party lines.
I mean, I think it's important to note that even members of the Planning Commission have gone on record to acknowledge. We've had the Prime Minister, Mr. Arun Maira, has been on the record to say that the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, had spoken about reforms and an overhaul. I think at this stage, instead of crying over spilt milk,
but nothing
we can
really
also
came of it,
nothing
right?
came of it. But let's acknowledge that inherently there was an acknowledgement, and I think we need to look forward and look ahead. And this is not a dismantling or a disabandonment. Instead, I mean, I think it's incorrect and premature to assume that looking forward there will not be a body that looks into development. So I think to look back is one approach. Of course, we need to analyze and learn from the mistakes of the past, but there will not be sort of like an economic policy making vacuum. So we don't, I'm certain about the fact that, there is still, a major poll pitch and a poll plank has been development. We are looking at inclusive development. It's a new approach and it's a new strategy. And yes, they have the finance minister has had his opinion, the prime minister has also made a mention, but we have to look ahead because this government seems to be very fast moving and forward thinking. So we can't spend
talking
too much
of what
time
you said,
looking back.
he is going to, the fact that development was the major poll issue,
yes,
and the fact that the Planning Commission has been blamed for policy paralysis. Yes. In fact, the whole standoff between the NHAI and the Planning Commission, the Highways Authority of India, and all that. So,
see, Mr. Chidambaram, whom you mentioned, has been giving these words of wisdom after he demitted office. Yes. And naturally, it will be taken as, very unfortunate. He held all powerful positions for 10 years. And the end, he comes up, I also thought like that, I also said like that. And it's pitiable that, sad to say that today the financial mess, perhaps he will also explain it. And he can't say, I was not finance minister myself. Therefore, I don't think you should take seriously his lamentations or advice now. You can, fortunately or unfortunately, in our country, those who are defeated, the old regime keeps clinging on and giving their opinions as if everything was correct. And it's hardly 720 hours since Mr. Narendra Modi took over, and they expect miracles from anyone. I am no fan of Narendra Modi or anything, but give him time. And don't come out and say, I said this and that. It reflects very poorly. And the fact is, your own subject now, Planning Commission, it requires a change because such people say various things now. Times have changed. Let's have a more modern body, as she has said.
And let's bring in another voice to talk about this. Ashok Wankhede, sir, good morning and welcome to the conversation. Can you hear me?
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning. We are talking of the Planning Commission and,
Yes.
the fact that the Modi government plans to revamp it and restructure it. Is this a change one should welcome, and is the Planning Commission set to become completely irrelevant? That is the conversation we are having. Your first thoughts on this subject?
Yes, I think we need to make a lot of changes in a lot of institutes. And you see, last 65, 70 years, most of the institutes have been politicalized. We have to restructure it in such a way that really it can be of any use to the nation, or if it is burden, it has to be scrapped also. There's nothing wrong in scrapping Planning Commission, and the contribution of Planning Commission at least last for 5 years or 10 years. I don't see anything. Only there is more controversies like below the poverty line, things like the people sitting in Planning Commission, with all due respect to their academic qualification and their achievements, I personally feel that they have lost the touch with the masses. Exactly, they don't know what exactly is happening in India. Merely by getting research papers and figures and playing with figures will not solve the problem.
Let me get a reaction on that. What you said, that the Planning Commission has not really been in touch with the masses. Girija, do you agree with Ashok?
I mean, I feel that the Planning Commission had become a largely centralized body, and that's a correct analysis. But I'm not sure in terms of steering policy, I do see that there is a gap, and that exists with many sort of think tank. I mean, their ideal aim or the suggestion has been that they are an expert, domain knowledge expert, you know, there should be a committee or a panel that's a think tank. So yes, their ideas were, they were getting further and further centralized, but there was an important element which is center state coordination, which remains something that is a challenge that needs to be looked into regardless, but more efficiently. I'll say that's
I entirely agree with Mr. Wankhede that they have been outdated. You see, and the Planning Commission also has some responsibility to take why they stopped economic development. For example, they wouldn't give clearance for road projects.
Yeah.
They took offense with the chairman of National Highway Authority, and then they fought with him, stopped all the road projects. They stopped irrigation projects. They encouraged the Environment Ministry. The only sad part is, now that they are passed, do they have any criminal liability for having harmed the nation, these members? I would like Mr. Wankhede,
My God, that's a
senior
very strong
person.
statement.
He's a very senior person.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for endorsing my thoughts, sir. I'm really honored.
Yeah, because
What
My
I personally
goodness,
feel-
you think they should
What I
think?
personally feel.
dangerous
I
turn.
don't know,
Thousands of farmers
I
are committing
believe
suicide.
you can't stop but harm a nation and then say, now I'm no longer.
Is it because of the money spent on the UID? Is that?
UIDA, as our colleague here and Mr. Wankhede should remember, they spent 15,000 crores on the UIDA, which is now scrapped. Who pays for this money? Do I pay for it, or does he pay for it, or the poor people of this country? 15,000 crores, $2.5 billion was spent on a card now, which they say is worthless. I'd like to hear their
Okay,
comments.
Mr. Wankhede, you talked of scrapping the Planning Commission. But my guest in the studio did talk of a body, a coordinating body, which would take off some of the burden from the Finance Ministry. Because the Finance Ministry, as Dr. Pulla Rao said, is not capable of doing everything. And, you know, where each penny is being spent, say, in his district in West Godavari, he talked of.
Nilanjana, I personally feel that we need to restructure the tax system.
Okay.
And the entire tax system as such. If the state is contributing, the state share has to be given to the state. And let state do that. Means I am not blaming Modi for that. But if you see all the state government, they spend money at their whims. And there is a lot of burden of loans and debt on the state as such. You see what is happening in Gujarat. The per capita debt is near about, I think, 57,600 and odd per head. If that goes like that, so what Planning Commission is doing? My basic problem is that even Planning Commission plans things for, if they are not getting result, who is going to take the responsibility of that? So it has become just merely a formality. Planning Commission plans something, the executive body executes as per their wishes. So what ultimately the country is going to gain out of it? If thousands of farmers are still committing suicide, if there is a malnutrition cases still coming up.
Exactly what I was trying to take this debate. Is there any accountability on the part of the Planning Commission or Finance Ministry? How will they be held accountable for all the waste of money? And 3 lakh farmers have committed suicides in the last 10 years. And the Planning Commission has not brought a single scheme for the farmers who have committed suicides and how to stop it.
Let's make one thing clear here, just to, you know, to bring this into perspective. The main role of the Planning Commission is to look into the efficacy of investments. Am I right?
Correct.
Where
Fund allocation.
Fund allocation, absolutely. So you know, where exactly have we gone wrong? Has there been a lack of political will? Has there been corruption that has seeped into it? What exactly has gone wrong in the system?
As a matter of fact, there has been excessive political will. Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia was Lord and Master, and his members were all chosen with his approval. If they did not like somebody, they did not find a place. More of the neoliberal type also landed up
So you
there.
think it was autocratic? Is what you're saying?
Naturally, you know, power goes to me, to anybody. So I don't blame him. But there should have been people who controlled him. If we found that something happened in another ministry, we blame the Prime Minister. Something is wrong here, whom do you blame? Somebody has to take responsibility, accountability for fund allocation, fund expenditure. You can't say, now I have retired, I have nothing to do with it.
Okay, so let's now talk of the road ahead. Girija mentioned a CBO-like system which is there in the United States, the Congressional Budget Office.
Yes.
So do you think something like that? What would your advice to the government be now?
My advice is take the planning commission.
Yeah.
Have 3 commissions or 2 commissions. One dealing with the social sector maybe, one dealing with the infrastructure sector, so that it doesn't become one gigantic body and they just say, you know, we have 20 members, 10 members. Have 2 smaller bodies and see how you can better do, better allocation of funds, better expenditure, and so that you have, you know, the independent evaluation office in the planning commission is not enough. It's a few statisticians and bureaucrats filing reports. It's not enough. This thing, where you can stand up to a chief minister of a state and say, you're spending badly, stop it. You have to have stature and you have to have something. You can't be a minor bureaucrat or just an expert. Nobody will care for experts unless you have stature. Remember, unless you have stature, it's not going to work. Nobody will care for you. A chief minister of a state will say, I refuse to correspond with you. So you have to think of these things. Governance means, you know, the ability to get your views across.
And get everybody to work with you.
Soft skills. Soft skills means, you know, that you already have something.
Right.
Soft knowledge, soft power.
Yeah.
So that is where something you have to think over. Perhaps 2 bodies, and they will carefully monitor, allocate, have experts, but just having experts, nobody is going to listen. Stature is an essential ingredient for getting anything done.
Girija, you know, we have been discussing in our other conversations also, and Dr. Rao might agree that, you know, the government so far has been keeping a lot of things close to its chest. We really don't know what it's thinking, where it's going to go. Do you think we are going to see something when the budget is announced, which is about to happen in a few weeks?
I think it would sort of be premature to sort of hedge bets on, you know, what are the outcomes yet. But
in terms of the planning commission.
I mean, in terms of the planning commission, I definitely will say, and taking on from Sir's point about you need to have a stature so that you take people, you know, work with you.
Yeah.
But we also need to realize that we need to take people with us. So
exactly.
Inclusive development is something that we cannot avoid. I completely agree that we need to demystify this process. We need to look into second generation reforms. That's a desperate need of the hour. But I think the whole need also is to take in inclusive development and look into aspects of holistic development and development on the whole much more closely and much more practically and pragmatically as well. And I don't think that the current government, whether it's their budget or whether it's their approach, is short-sighted about development. I mean, we all are cognizant of the fact that development was a major poll pitch and
Absolutely.
a poll plank for this general election for our Prime Minister. So he does not sideline. I think it's not premature, and we can safely say that he does not overlook development. He realizes the value of aspects of development. So we can only look forward to, after seeing his approach to his state, to see at a larger scale what it'll be. I really do look forward, whether it's the budget or whether it's other reforms and other announcements that come. I do look forward to a more holistic approach that has been an example that he himself has set over the past 3 terms.
So after 64 years, Dr. Rao, a clean break from the past and a new planning commission, is that what we should look forward to?
I don't think you can break with the past. You know, the past is not entirely bad and the future is very uncertain.
Right.
So you have to take what is good in the past,
Some
don't
learning.
tinker with it. Don't tinker if it doesn't need to be fixed, as they say.
Yes.
And go ahead, look openly, experiment. And experiment, but take responsibility and accountability. You know, we don't want all kinds of experts landing here. And so far, just to add a little, I'm quite happy that I haven't found Columbia University economists coming here and telling us how you do these things. So far, I'm very happy that no economists, experts, other places have come here they were all giving advice before the election. So far, I would be happy if I know Mr. Modi is sticking to Indian experts, whoever they are. At least they are before us. They know our conditions.
Right.
So while change is necessary, cautious change, carefully building up institutions.
All right. So a more responsible, accountable planning commission or whatever they decide to call it in the future, and a commission which is definitely more inclusive and understands the needs of the common man and understands the problems of the common man. So that is the advice that our guests are giving, in fact, the present government. I would like to thank Ashok Wankhede for joining in on the conversation, and also my guest Dr. Rao Girija. Thank you so much for joining. The conversation continues on India Post Live through your audio and video posts, your comments. Okay, I see Ashok Wankhede back. Thank you so much. We are just wrapping up the conversation with the unanimity that the Planning Commission, in whichever form it comes, needs to be more inclusive, responsible and accountable. The conversation, of course, continues on the portal through your tweets and comments. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.